but we head for the first weekend after the college football rankings from the committee, the College Football Playoff Committee, gave out their rankings. And, of course, there were some that, that's not right. That doesn't make any sense. And then there were some, that's about right. And so we're going to break that down. And we are loaded up today with guests. Taylor McCart from ESPN and CBS, Greg Wrubell, BYU's broadcast voice, Stevenson Sylvester, color analyst for Utah, Zion Chris, quarterback in Houston, will join us today, Zach Gelb, national talk show host, and then Gary Barnett, former Colorado coach who was at Northwestern too, and then we'll have our Big 12 North pod. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina to the right and to my left, and we're glad you're with us today, plus we have Paul's top five. So here's the standings. I looked at this. I didn't overreact either way. I kind of think I thought that's about where they would have BYU. I thought that was a little low, but then again, that's what we're here to discuss. So there we are. The top 25 from the College Football Playoff Committee. Both of you guys digest what you want on who maybe is where they shouldn't be or who's not getting respect, because there's some teams that think, and conferences, that they're not getting respect.
Well, yeah, it's pretty it's pretty easy to say that, when you have Alabama at 11 when they've got 2 losses, and you've got some teams with 1 loss like Penn State ahead of teams that are undefeated like BYU and Indiana. So yeah, I mean there are historical biases in here, and you can see that. This is. I think the one thing that they'll never be able to completely weed out, and I know that they say they will, but is this about what happens this year or about how you feel about the history of a team? Mm-hmm. And clearly Penn State being ranked after that loss against Ohio State, and the history of the team by the numbers is not even close to good when it comes to winning big games. That loss should mean more because they, if you're going on history, then they never win those games. Yeah. So why is BYU behind it? Why is SMU behind it and all that?
We're going to look at a couple of reasons that are some, I guess, statistics that kind of make you wonder, okay, wait a minute, why is this? Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking forward to this just to see what it looked like for the first time and to see kind of how they set the table. I was very quickly reminded that I'm not going to be tuning into these every week, much like the previous playoff rankings, but this first one I was interested in, and I'm going to probably just dabble with it moving forward because I feel like the big story as it pertains to, directly us in some ways in the Big 12 is BYU, and that was a team that got a lot of attention. It seems like all the writers kind of just follow the leader, you know what I mean, on Twitter. They all do the same thing, the same engagement, the same thing. And, it's just – so there was this, rash of woe is BYU, tweets that just started coming out one after the other and got a lot of play because BYU's got, a massive social media presence. And it's a valid point, the BYU is getting disrespected card. But I know I'm going to say what's not popular, but it's true, BYU fans. Just win games and you will be totally fine in the end. You will have a first-round bye like you do in the rankings last night. You look at the rankings last night and what was said beforehand. Don't confuse the seeding with the actual game. So BYU, they're ninth. They'd have a first-round bye in the actual playoffs. Yep. So you see that and you go, oh, my, ninth? But you still have a first-round bye as one of the highest-rated conference champions. I know that's not the exact point of the complaints, but I do think in their case, for all of the – every media member firing off a tweet about BYU and getting a lot of play for it, that everybody doing that also knows that they are in control of their destiny and that they are going to be just fine in the end if they win out. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but that really is the straight-to-the-point thing on the rankings for BYU last night. Now, I will say at the same time, clearly the committee does not love the Big 12. That much is very clear. Yeah. So I think more than BYU being worried, and look, BYU, valid reasons for being ticked off, being ranked behind maybe 1 or 2 teams because of their schedule. I don't feel like their schedule is getting nearly enough love for who they've actually beaten. I feel like people are still kind of taking them as though they're some lucky team or something like that when they went to SMU and beat SMU, and they beat the dog mess out of Kansas State. So they've got 2 huge wins, and they could have some more down the stretch, the Big 12 championship game, for example. But so I do think – big picture, you're totally fine. I understand why you might feel a bit disrespected, though, but I think the rest of the Big 12 should be far more worried than BYU about the opinion of the Big 12. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
I also think that there is very much name brand bias still going on, and it's very clear.
Oh, yeah,
it's
because
very
if
clear.
You took the names off Indiana's jersey.
Yes.
Or BYU's jersey, and maybe even another jersey or two, and put somebody else's name that is one of the Augusta National members, then they would be ranked a little bit differently.
Yeah, so I think that BYU is a bit too low, but they'll be okay because of where they are. They are unbeaten. They control their own destiny. They will not be left out. They will not be left without a bye. Just keep winning games. You will be fine. Now, Kansas State, Iowa State, anybody else that's got any scent of a trail of hope to reach the playoff, I think you're a bit more worried about things after last night, because I think it's going to be really difficult for the Big 12 to get a second team in unless things just fall a certain way. I think there's definitely the same big name biases, like I just mentioned, that was clear in the 14 playoff. I think it's still clear in the 12-team playoff with the way that some teams were treated compared to others, especially when you saw the one particular stat about BYU having had more top 25 wins than Indiana, Tennessee, Penn State, and Texas combined. And so those things just get overlooked because of the brand name recognition. So I think that's still ingrained in this committee. I don't know how you ever root that out entirely. After all, it's a television product. So Tennessee is always going to look better than Indiana does or better than BYU does. But those are kind of my biggest things. Like, BYU's fine, but I understand feeling a little disrespected. Big 12 should feel a lot disrespected, and you as a conference are not fine. And that's like that direct part of it. As for the rest of it, yeah, if you're Indiana, you might feel a certain type of way, but I think all that's going to work itself out. I'm not flipping my lid over the very first set of rankings.
All right, there's a lot to get. Go ahead. There's a lot to get to. We need to get a lot of it, because then we go straight to Craig. There's a lot of other things to prove what you guys are talking about, or maybe prove the other point, and we will get to that.
Yeah, the next time we have Rich Clark on, I'm going to ask him, is it difficult to convey the point of this is just about today and not about your feelings about a certain program and what they've done? I think that's the hardest thing, because everybody's human. You think that, but you think the certain way, but if you really look at what each team has done this year in the present, then your rankings would look different.
It should never be about what somebody's done in the past.
Yeah.
It should be about what somebody's done this season. It shouldn't even be about what you think is going to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. So, okay, here are a couple of notes. Here are the first-round games based on – we don't have that? Okay. Here is Joe Klatt and his thoughts about BYU and the committee bias. There's the quote from Joe Klatt. There are other broadcasters nationally that have their opinions about this too. So your thoughts about what Joe Klatt has to say?
Well, I think we just spent some time talking about it. If you've watched BYU or Indiana, you would rank them higher than some of the teams. You would rank them higher than Penn State. You would probably rank them higher than Tennessee. Tennessee has a very good defense. They have a very wonky offense that sometimes looks fantastic and sometimes doesn't look so great. And Tennessee lost to Arkansas, who is very mediocre. Neither of those teams have lost. So, yeah, I totally agree with what he said on BYU and Indiana. 100% that if you've really watched them, that you're not going to rank them behind, a Tennessee, a Penn State, or someone like that.
Yeah, you wonder if there was a safe spot. Well, we can move BYU down a little bit because they are right now number 4, if that's what it would be, and that they didn't know if they would have any blowback. I don't think they care about the blowback. I think that they do what they do no matter what any of us say. And BYU, like Craig said, you have to just keep winning. You have to keep winning. Ward Manuel, speaking on behalf of the selection committee, when asked about Miami, he said, and here we go. It didn't take long. Offensive prowess, when asked about the gap between the Hurricanes and number 9 unbeaten BYU, God, I almost feel dirty that I should wash my mouth out with soap. It came down to more of an eye test. So let's discuss real quickly the eye test. This from Johnny Linehan. The eye test that had a Hail Mary overturned against Virginia Tech and targeting no call against Cal eye test. That was a thought from him. The eye test, yes, they look dynamic. I remember when the eye test used to mean you had to play defense. Well, that's what BYU does. Miami doesn't do as much of that. I'm not arguing against Miami. They're really good. But it took 1 week, the first damn poll, and we heard eye test.
Yeah, look, just say Miami's undefeated in a power league. Now, the thing you can't do that is then you've got to go like, well, BYU's got to be up higher than they are because they're behind a couple of SEC teams. I would say, like, don't say eye test. Say Miami is where they are because of Cam Ward. We think Cam Ward's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He's a difference maker that not everybody has. And because of Cam Ward, yes, that you don't have to say the words eye test, but quarterback-wise, they are humming along. They've got the number one offense in the country. Or just say that. They have the number one offense in the country. And it has buoyed them a lot considering their defense is not as good as they wanted it to be, but it doesn't matter because they score, 50 points a week almost.
Yeah, that's one of those quotes where you would just rather watch Miami because they're the bigger brand is how I heard him say that because his explanation doesn't make any damn sense. And it makes me question how much they've actually watched. But I know we'll hear, we sit in a room together and we watch all of these games. We got like 5 screens going on and this and that. But I question that because how could you say in one hand about Miami, particularly their offensive prowess, they were impressive in their win against Louisville. They dominated at the beginning of the year against Florida because Florida's great, right? Came back against Cal in a very late-night contest for Miami. So now they're getting body clock credit. Mm-hmm. He didn't say body clock, but he's giving them body clock credit for a very late-night contest for Miami. And then talks about BYU. BYU as well is very strong. Impressive wins against number 13 and number 19 in a dominating fashion. Talking about the K-State game, it came down to more of the eye test, and we ranked them. So, I think he's given Miami more of the benefit of the doubt because you're spitting out 2 top 25 rankings, whereas for Miami, you're spitting out that they played late at night against Cal and they beat Florida at the beginning of the year and were impressive against Louisville, as opposed to kicking the dog mess out of a ranked Kansas State team who's still ranked and also beating SMU, who's still ranked at SMU. Like, spare me, dude. That doesn't make me think that he's being on the up and up as far as just it simply being the eye test. I mean, I know that's what they're using. The eye test, though, could mean that logo makes my eyes bigger when I watch them because it's the resumes are clear. BYU has a better resume, they have better wins. It's not even close. They have better wins. So I just question how much they're really watching BYU in some cases. And I do think they're going to probably suffer from some of that brand bias, but as I said at the top, I'm not going to fret too much over these first rankings. BYU, if they win out, are fine. They are totally fine. They're not going to get left out. They're not going to not have a first-round bye. If they win out, they will be sitting there top 4 with a first-round bye, and they will be totally fine.
Yeah, and they got to be careful because there's not much room for error because Boise State being where they are, that opens the door up for Jeremiah Dickey and the Broncos athletic department and football team. They're in a very good spot because of the rest of their schedule, who they've played, losing barely to Oregon. They're a very fun team to watch. They are in a good position and almost waiting to pounce.
Yeah, they are, but if you're BYU, you do know as much as you shouldn't fret if you win out. Yeah, if you lose a game, you're probably tumbling pretty dramatically. So there is that concern, that nervousness. So there's one solution, and that's just to keep winning games. Otherwise, you open yourself up to them allowing some movement that could hurt you and hurt you bad. So basically the point being, destiny's in your hands. I know it feels like it's in the hands of the playoff committee. It is to some small degree, but for right now at least, with no losses in your loss column, destiny is in your hands. You only allow it to be in their hands when you lose a game.
Yep.
So just win out.
No.
That's my point. I know it seems too simple for a radio show to just say the obvious, but it would make more sense to be like, the committee hates BYU and like do all that kind of jazz, but I think it's pretty simple. Just keep winning games.
I don't think anybody in there doesn't like BYU or doesn't respect Boise State, but there are some biases, and that's why there's a large committee. One of those, by the way, is Mack Rhodes, the Baylor director of athletics. By the way, this is not complaining. This is not whining. If you are like, well, wait a minute, you or us or whoever, this is breaking it down and discussing what was released. We would be dumb just to say, hey, here are the 12 or 25 teams, and we move on to yet other discussions. But look at a couple other stats. This is from our good friend Cody Kellner. Record versus opponents with a winning record. BYU and Indiana are both unbeaten, 3-0 and 2-0. Record versus bowl-eligible opponents, BYU is 2-0. Record versus current top 25, BYU is 2-0. So those are some of the inside the numbers. And then also this one, there are 5 teams in college football. These are not the unbeaten teams. In fact, the only one unbeaten in that list is Oregon and BYU, I believe. 5 teams, actually, there are 7 teams there. That's which one? Is that from Cody Kellner? Yeah. That have wins against 3 teams that are bowl eligible. So there we are with that. 7 teams have 2 wins versus the current CFP top 25, SMU, Oregon, BYU, Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia, and also Texas A&M.
Yeah, some of those teams are ranked behind teams that have none of those. Like say Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Tennessee has one, but like they're there. So it's weird. Again, I think it's just the problem is historical biases. People see a jersey, like you said, Craig. They see that and that 30 for 30 was better than Pony Express.
Yeah, I know, I agree with that, but I just don't think it's all that though, guys. I mean, I think this is reaching overreaction to the first set of rankings already. You know what I mean? Like there's 4 games to play for everybody. So again, that's why I know it's not the popular radio show answer, but it's pretty simple. If you're BYU, win your games and you will be fine. I'll keep saying that because that's the clearest as day response to what we saw last night. To all the biases, to all the eye test opinions, you control your own destiny as much as you possibly can. You don't if you lose to Utah this weekend. Yep. As far as the rest of it goes, the 2 top 25 wins and this and that, I mean, that's not the barometer of, hey, let's rank them by top 25 wins. It's an element of the overall package, and it's just a matter of how much weight do they give certain things, and you can fairly question, well, how much weight's being given to top 25 wins if this team with none or 1 is this much higher than this team with 2, but you've got to break it down further than just a simple metric like that. So I do think at this point, with a month to go, eye test is part of it. I mean, that is going to be a part of having a human committee, and whether we like it or not, it's not the BCS. That's just straight machine, and here's numbers and put them out. But you know what? If you lined them up next to each other, they're almost identical.
Yeah, I think out of the 12 teams, there was like 2 that were
barely different. Yeah. So like the computers basically said the same thing that we saw last night. So again, it's the first rankings. I'll be more worried if they still had, an unbeaten BYU at 9 3 weeks from now, after having won 3 more games. Then I'd be like, okay, wait a second here. But yeah, I think a committee, look, you can argue that 8 of the best teams are in the SEC or in the Big Ten. As much as I know that's not popular probably with some of our audience, who's to say that's not true?
We don't know, though.
Right.
But that's why it's good that we have as many teams that are going to be able to figure that out.
And there's still going to be more eliminations this weekend, and there will be more eliminations the week after, and so on and so forth. And maybe this is all moot because Utah just puts together a hell of a game this weekend. Or another one of these teams that we're talking about gets knocked off this weekend, not just the Cougars. But, there's definitely some of the same complaints that you had with the 4-team ranking. I think we can safely say that. In terms of biases or just what the committee is kind of doing in terms of talking out both sides of their mouths in some cases. And most of all, let's acknowledge that what the committee will always do, they will say whatever they need to say to fit the narrative that they want to say that week. So if it's game control or it's top 25 wins or
exactly
it's
right.
the conference or whatever, we get all involved in that, but it just switches to whatever needs to be said to justify their rankings every week.
Here's the thing. The eye test, it took them less than a week. It took them the first damn show. There will be their record against the top 25, but apparently that was not the case this week. But maybe in a couple of 2 or 3 weeks, that's the case. It might be controlling the game. I don't know how many of the teams inside the top 5 or 10 can say that they've always been able to control the game because some of them have a loss. It is the first week. There are more to come. We'll know in the first week of December who's going to be a part of the 12. It's good. The AP poll and all that will still come out on Monday, the coaches poll, but there we are with that. Here's a note about Boise State that I thought was just stunning. They have not been stopped by an opponent in their last 52 trips inside the red zone with Dirk Cutter as the offensive coordinator. 48 scores, 4 end-of-the-game kneel downs, 0 stops inside the opponent's red zone, 20-yard line, their last 52 possessions inside the 20. That's insane. That's just insane. That's a great number. The kneel downs, of course, the clock's running out, you're closing out the game.
Yeah, I would advise people to look at the biggest reason for that is they have an elite running back. Imagine that. I watch like I'm watching some other sport where running backs aren't that valuable. Yeah, the player who can get the ball at inside the 20s when you have less room to throw the ball, like that's way more valuable if you have Ashton Genty on your team or Gente.
I'm working on that.
Janta, but Ashton Genty on your team, yeah, you're going to score a lot. So all the NFL and college teams that think like by committee is a great idea and anybody can do this, no, not anybody can do this. Get yourself a stud if you can get one.
Yeah. So Boise State right there in the middle of it. It's kind of fun. Next week, as Craig said, you have wins and losses this week. Will be fun, but there will be a different next week. It'll be controlling the game or whatever. But get used to that. We've seen that ever since really the first year in 2014.
Do you have a graphic of the bracket based on last night?
I thought I sent that.
You didn't. I'm looking at it now. You didn't have the person who it was on the email, so
okay.
I didn't have it.
Well, here let's. I have them in front of me, and we can discuss that because
I just think it's cool to look at.
I think and I also think one of what I look for is not who's ranked here and there. What I look at is I don't think there's any question, and nobody could probably convince me otherwise, that when they do seed the 4 top seeds, that's conference champions, the 4 highest ranked conference champions. When they do seed the 5 through 12, there's nobody that can convince me that they won't set it up to where you won't have Georgia, Alabama in like the second round or Ohio State against whoever in the second round. But I did see that there's a chance that Texas, based on last night, could play Alabama in the first round if they're a part of the top 12.
Yeah, but I think it's fun to look at week to week just to know we're getting matchups like that, but that's not going to happen. I think there's more. There's 4 to 5 more games left. I don't think that's going to end up happening.
No, okay. This is what Oregon, Georgia, Miami, BYU would have an off week. Ohio State and Boise State, Texas, Alabama, Penn State, Notre Dame, Tennessee, and Indiana. Now, then you start. Okay, who's Oregon going to play? They're going to play either Tennessee or they're going to play either Ohio State and Boise State.
No, Indiana or Tennessee.
Okay. Who's Georgia? Who's Oregon? Who's Georgia going to play?
Either Notre Dame or Penn State.
Miami, the 3rd seed, if they end up where they are.
They play Alabama or Tennessee.
Why Alabama and Tennessee?
Because that's 7 versus.
That's where the bracket goes.
That's 7 versus 10 or 7 versus 11, whatever it is.
So
6 versus 11 would go play the 3 seed.
Yeah.
Okay, that would be Texas, Alabama.
Texas 5th.
No, they're not.
No, guys.
6, okay.
You just said who's Miami playing, right?
Yeah,
they play Texas or Alabama.
that's what I said. Yeah, you were looking at where they are. No, we're looking at remember now.
Yeah.
And then BYU, if they get the 4th seed, they would play the winner between Ohio State and Boise State.
Correct.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be unbelievable if it ended up, which Boise State and BYU in the next round. Ohio State, of course, would say something about that, but that would get those 2 teams another round into at least the 3rd round of the college football playoff. And then who knows if that's going to happen yet or not. Mike Gundy, late yesterday. I apologize to those who my comments during Monday's media call offended. My intent was not to offend any of our fans and who have supported us and this program through the years. Very short and very sweet.
Yeah, I mean,
you think it's sweet?
Somebody made him do that. Somebody said, "Hey, you've got to put the genie back in the bottle if you can." And I'm sure he wasn't trying to offend fans. Like, no coach is usually trying to offend fans, but you have to know that there is a group of people who are hanging on every word you say, and hanging on every word you say even harder when you stink and they stink right now. So, he's not used to that. So I get, kind of flying off the handle a little bit or going rogue. But, yeah, no, somebody made him do that.
Yeah, I don't know if somebody made him do it or not, but I know it was about as short and to the point as possible, and it sure came across that way if you were more inclined to believe that somebody put a gun to his head and made him write that out or at least put his name on it or whatever. It was short and to the point enough that it was kind of funny and very flippant. And at the same time, not something that you necessarily expected to see him do. So take it however you want to. I didn't need an apology from him, but I'm certainly not an Oklahoma State, alum or fan who's probably feeling some type of way about this season and his comments. So maybe that was good for you to hear that. I do think there was a good portion of his quote that was left out the other day in terms of the comparison. It didn't make it that much better, but at least made it more understandable what he was trying to say and failing so miserably at saying before he veered off course and started taking personal shots at his own fans. But what he was trying to say made sense initially, and then he veered off. So, yeah, I can see where that warranted an apology for a fan base who's pretty fed up, and you still got a month to go, and you still got, games at home that you want people to show up for, and you're not going to be able to put a lipstick on this pig, but you can start to try to build something for next year. But you didn't do yourself any favors when you started attacking those who support you. So we'll see how this is taken in the coming days and how they finish it out. But not surprised to see an apology and not surprised that it was short, to the point, and almost could be read as sarcastic if you wanted to take it that way, because I don't think Mike Gundy's probably all that sorry. And I think he probably thinks that everybody who needs this apology is the exact type of people he was talking about, but he had to do what he had to do.
Why, though? Why, if you don't really believe, if he didn't, why apologize?
Because it wasn't his choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because your entire fan base is pissed at you right now. Whether you believe what you said was true or not, at some point you're not the end-all, be-all, and maybe it dawned on him that, hey, you're not untouchable. And maybe it dawned on him that, like, hey, people will stop coming to games. Go recruit now, pal. Like, who supports you? When things are down, who's supporting them right now outside of Oklahoma State fans?
No, look.
Nobody. So if you're going to piss off the one people that support you, you may want to rethink that, especially when you did talk out of turn. And even if some people took it extremely the wrong way, you said it in a way that was easy to take it that way. And quite frankly, there was no spinning some of it. You were just saying some stuff that you shouldn't have been saying, quite frankly, because it was insulting to a lot of people out there. So I don't demand the guy be fired or anything other than that. Hey, you made your apology. Great. Let's move on. Go try and win a game and go try to rebuild that program, because it desperately needs some care this offseason.
All right. If you're an Oklahoma State fan, and we have some of you that are in the chat, or any topic we bring up, and you're a fan of that school, whoever it might be, give us your opinion, and we'll read some of those to you. And some of you said he didn't mean it. Some of you said he did. He had a follow-up tweet, which I didn't follow that part, whatever. So here is Kyle Whittingham. Utah and BYU. We have two guests today to discuss BYU and Utah, the holy war that's being played this weekend. Here is Utah football coach Kyle Whittingham on what makes BYU so good.
BYU's obviously improved quite a bit year to year. Who or what is the strength of that offense?
I'd say the QB is the catalyst. You look at individual rushers, individual receivers. There's nobody that just jumps out statistically. It's a collaborative effort, but the quarterback is the catalyst, in my opinion, and playing good football. He's amongst the league leaders in pass efficiency. He's made some just a bunch of really timely runs during the course of the season, runs that have made big difference maker type of runs. And so I would say that is without a doubt the guy that makes it all go. But again, he's got a good supporting cast, but again, nobody is just jumping out on the stat line. I don't know if they have a top 10 receiver or a top 10 running back, but you don't need to. You don't have to do that to be successful. And then as a team, very opportunistic football team. They're playing good complementary defense, offense to each other. Defense is taking the ball away like crazy. Offense is protecting the ball. They're number 2 in the country, in the conference in turnover margin. So they're doing a really good job playing off each other offensively and defensively.
All right, that game is coming up this weekend, and obviously with all of this on the line, not only the rivalry, but also the Big 12 championship berth in the sights of BYU, plus where they are when it comes to the college football playoff.